Good evening, sword enthusiasts, and welcome to part 2 of the RyanSword 1060 Differentially Hardened Custom Kissaki-Moroha Zukuri Hokusai's Little Crow Circle, or the True Kogarasu-Maru review. That was an absolute mouthful, but that's Japanese for you. Very, very descriptive in long terms, and that's why we love these things. So this is going to be less of a review and more of a documentary on how we came up with the design for Hokusai's Little Crow. So this is primarily going to be a voiceover as I overlay some of the findings that were found that go along with this, and then you can start seeing how we pieced the sword together part by part, bit by bit, and came to the final copy of this. So let's go ahead and get started. The Kogarasu-Maru, the Kissaki-Moroha Zukuri sword, and possibly the oldest extant curved samurai sword as we know it from transitioning from straight Chinese style blades into what we would call something distinctly Japanese, was allegedly made by the famous smith Amankuni. There are a lot of myths and legends about how the sword came to be, whose hands it went to first, whose hands it ended up in, and that's a whole nother subject in and of itself. But the main legend, as it goes, is that I believe Amankuni and his son were witnessing an army coming back from a battle, and they were defeated. And as they watched the defeated soldiers walk by them one by one, they all noticed the same thing. They noticed that their swords, their straight swords, were broken. So they said they failed their lord, and they prayed, and they were going to shut themselves in, and they were going, if the soldiers were going to use a sword and abuse it so much, they were going to make something that could withstand that abuse. And as the legend goes, after they locked themselves indoors and worked tirelessly, the Kissaki-Moroha Zukuri was what came out. The little crow circle was what came out, and they equipped the army with those, and broken blades were no more, and they were successful in battle. That's the legend anyway. Choose to believe it if you would not. However, in the first recorded attribution of this sword, it is attributed to either Amankuni himself or the school. So there is something to be said about that. What we're going to do now is we're going to dive into a timeline of certain events and things so you can see how this kind of built out. So we know this sword is very old, probably I believe in the 700s, 738 or so, I believe is the date that sticks out in my mind. The first drawing of this sword, or I guess you could say record of it on paper somewhere other than a mention and a legend, but an actual drawing, was in the Honami Kotetsu, which was an anthology series of works of famous artifacts that was created between 1558 and 1637. In this volume, in one of the volumes of the Honami Kotetsu, there was a Tang drawing, and this is the oldest drawing of supposedly what the little crow is. This is important because that Tang drawing is consistent with other appearances of the sword throughout history up until modern time at the Imperial Treasury. The next time it pops up in literature is what's referred to as the Sadatake drawing. This was sometime between 1761 and 1769. This was and this is recorded in the Shuko Jissho, which is another record of works. This is the first recorded full image of the sword and all of its parts. At this point in time, the sword was recorded in broken mountings. It was in its second koshire at that time. So at this point, the original Little Crow mountings, the supposed Little Crow Manuki that it gets its name from, according to legend, those were more than likely long since gone, and the sword had been remounted multiple times. At this point in time, Sadatake claimed that this sword had been in his family's possession since 938. So the sword was relatively dated somewhere in between 738 and 782-ish. And Sadatake claims in this volume that it had been in his family's possession since 938, and that they had been the uninterrupted stewards of that sword from 938 until 1761, 1769, when this was created. So that's a long period of lineage for this sword to stay in one place. If you take a look at this drawing, there are a couple of things that are unique on it. The mountings are very unique. We tried to pick some things out of this because this is a record of the sword at that point in time. So obviously there's a very unique saya and Tsuka here, which we were not going to be able to carry over, but we tried to carry over some of the colors that were present in the Sageyo. We tried to select a Tsuba that somewhat resembled the Tsuba shape that was present at this point in time. The one thing that we were able to nail, however, was the Manuki, the Buddhist symbol on the Manuki. So we locked that in from the picture, the drawing, the rendition here, and we were able to incorporate that in our design. From this point, the next time the Little Crow Circle is referenced is in a Hokusai surimono, dated 1822. So, surimono, first of all, are different from woodblock prints. Woodblock prints were kind of like your equivalent of a modern-day giclée or a print. You know, an artist would do a couple of them, get them to a gallery, the gallery would put them up and they would sell them and kick some money back to the artist. Surimono were commissioned works, often by famous family and the wealthy. I think that's important because Hokusai didn't just draft this up and mass produce it and kick it out there to make a bunch of money off of it. Someone hired him to make this drawing. So, who hired him? Was it the Sadatake family? Maybe. At the point that they received the sword, it did not have the mountings that were covered in Hokusai's drawings, but did someone explain to him what those mountings were? If it had been in their family since 938, it's very possible that they had inside information on what it originally looked like, and it was passed down generations through generations. And of course, Hokusai, as we know, is probably one of the most famous artists ever, right? You've all seen The Great Wave. So it's the same guy, right? If you were wondering. There are mounts to us that are new pictured in this drawing. We do not know if the sword was remounted at this point in time in 1822, and these were the mounts that were on the sword, or if this was something that existed prior to that. But you see the Tachi fittings on it, you see the reference to the crow. It's obvious that more than likely someone within the family was who commissioned this surimono. So there may have been some oral tradition there. 1822 is the date here. Now, the next time that we have this sword pop up, and which is what brings us into the modern age, is Count Shigemasa. Count Shigemasa lived from 1847 to 1902, and he was of Taira lineage. This is important as well because if you go back to the original legends pre-Sadatake's claim that it was in his family since 938, this sword was supposedly in the hands of the Taira clan. So, he purchased this sword from someone. We do not know who was in possession of it at that point in time, but the Count purchased it. At the time that he purchased it, it had even more damage on the mounts, which were unknown. This was sometime in around, again, that 1860 time frame. The Count had the sword repaired, And then, most importantly, it was gifted to Emperor Meiji, which is where it has stayed since then. There's a couple of other interesting pieces of information here. The Hokusai print was bought in 1861 to 1865. So it was done in 1822. The print was done. It was then purchased in 1861 to 1865. The Count purchased the sword in 1867. So we're kind of putting all these time frames together. And then in 1882, it was given to Emperor Meiji, where it stayed in the imperial family ever since. So we don't really know what it looks like today because it is in the Imperial Treasury Museum, which is not accessible to the public. However, there has been a photograph of the blade itself and the Nakago, which is the most important thing that you would want to take a look at here, because the Nakago of the sword that is currently in the Imperial Treasury Museum, you can go all the way back to the Honami Kotetsu in 1558 to 1637 and match that Nakago up. The Nakago's condition in 1558 to 1637 was significantly better than it was today, and Amanakuni was more able to be read out at that point in time, even though it was already heavily faded. You got to remember, this is an old sword, potentially the oldest curved samurai sword in existence. Pretty exciting stuff, pretty interesting stuff in my mind. So we can't go see it. We don't know. We have this one photo that we can verify it is what it is, and at least goes back to that time frame. We have the oral traditions, the recorded traditions at that point in time. There's a replica that we used to kind of create the Sugata of the sword. We missed a couple of things. Our Nakago was a little too curved, a little too extreme. We missed the Naginata-hi that's present on the original, just small oversights, but we were able to duplicate the very prominent Suguha homon on it, as well as the wide hi down the center, second hi down the center of the blade. We did our best to mimic the fittings that were found in the Hokusai, so I'll kind of show you them one by one here, and you can see how we put it all together. But it'll be really interesting if someday they ever let us take a picture of it and we see what mountings, if any, that sword's currently in. It should have had mountings at some point. That's how it was gifted to the Emperor. I can't see it going to their hands, having the mountings removed and vanished somewhere, and it's just a blade in Shirasea or a bare blade. So who knows? Maybe one day it'll come out and it'll look just like this Hokusai surimono, or maybe it's a third or fourth mounting that we've never seen before. But that's the process. All the information that you can see here is available. If you've got ADHD hyperfixations like me, you can hop on Wikipedia and take yourself down a research rabbit hole on this and connect everything together. So hopefully there's a few of you like me out there that tuned into this and said, wow, that's crazy. I can see how that all kind of follows in, and let's look at the forensic work on this sword. But it's my first time ever tracking something down like that as a complete amateur, and it was a whole lot of fun. And I think it made a sword that pays strong homage to this beautiful woodblock print that I plan on buying a reproduction of someday and displaying along with the sword. So this has been part 2, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you could see how if you find some historical sword and you track it down and you'd like your very own replica of that, and potentially even a functional replica of that if you would like, RyanSword is more than willing to make that happen for you. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a fantastic week and or weekend. And again, if you liked this content, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel. Feel free to give me your feedback on what you thought about it. Everything helps, and have a wonderful day.
Studio GDT reviews are made possible by the following sponsors: